Part 1 focuses on Wayne Couzens' career and previous behaviour. A report dealing with Part 1's findings has today been published. First and foremost, I would take this time to think about Sarah Everard's family and her loved ones at what must be an incredibly difficult time. And I pay tribute to them all for the immense dignity that they have shown in the face of such an unbearable loss in such terrible circumstances. Tragically, the report identifies that Couzens was completely unsuitable to serve as a police officer, and worse still, that there were multiple occasions where this could have been recognised. Lady Eilish found significant and repeated problems in recruitment and vetting throughout Couzens' career, including overlooking his chaotic financial situation. This meant that he was able to serve in a range of privileged roles, including as a firearms officer. It is appalling that reports of indecent exposure by Couzens were not taken sufficiently seriously by the police, and that officers were not adequately trained, equipped, or motivated to properly investigate those allegations. Had fuller inquiries been made in 2015 and 2020, Couzens could, perhaps probably would, have been removed from policing. Evidence of his preference for extreme and violent pornography and alleged sexual offending date back nearly 20 years prior to Sarah Everard's murder. And the inquiry found that Couzens was adept at hiding his grossly offensive behaviour from most of his colleagues, but that he shared his vile and misogynistic views on a WhatsApp group. The other members of that group are no longer serving officers after a range of disciplinary processes. The fact that many of his alleged victims felt unable to report their experience at the time speaks to an issue of confidence in policing among women. I wish to place on record my thanks to Lady Eilish and her team for this report. It is a deeply distressing but incredibly important piece of work, and they have approached it with thoroughness, professionalism, and sensitivity. And we all owe thanks to the brave testimony of those who came forward and spoke to the inquiry. Everyone who Couzens hurt is in my thoughts today. The report makes 16 recommendations, and they include improving the police response to indecent exposure, reforming police recruitment and vetting practices, and addressing cultures within policing. The government will now, of course, carefully consider the report and respond formally in due course, and I can assure the House our response will be prompt. We are taking action to address public confidence in the police, and there has already been progress in a number of areas that have been highlighted by the inquiry. Anyone who is not fit to wear the uniform for whatever reason must be removed from policing, and every effort must be made to ensure that similar people never join. That is why we're providing funding to the National Police Chiefs Council to develop an automated system for flagging intelligence about officers in a much quicker time than is currently the case. We're changing the rules to make it easier for forces to remove those who cannot hold the minimum level of clearance. And police chiefs are getting back the responsibility for chairing misconduct hearings so that they can better uphold the standards in the forces that they lead. And there will be a presumption for dismissal for any officer found to have committed gross misconduct. And I can announce today that there will also be an automatic suspension of police officers charged with certain criminal offences. But the work must continue. Part 2 of the Angelini report is considering systemic issues in policing, such as vetting, recruitment and the culture, as well as the safety of women in public spaces. I will, of course, read those findings closely and with care. Madam Deputy Speaker, Sarah Everard's murder started a national conversation about violence and women and girls. And my right honourable friend, the member for Witham, reopened a call for evidence which went on to receive 180,000 responses from members of the public, many sharing their own harrowing personal experience. That evidence demonstrated the terrible truth that women and girls routinely feel unsafe. This is unacceptable. This should anger us all, and the whole of society needs to treat change in this area as an urgent priority. Tackling violence against women and girls is and has for a long time been a priority for me. It is now a priority set out in the strategic policing requirement, meaning it is rightly considered to be something as serious in our focus as tackling terrorism. Our tackling violence against women and girls strategy and tackling domestic abuse plans are backed up by significant investment. We are changing the law so that rapists will serve their full sentence behind bars with no option of release at the 2/3 point. And anyone who commits murder with a sexual or sadistic element will spend the rest of their days in prison. Our Safer Streets Fund and Safety of Women at Night Fund support a range of projects across England and Wales. The online Street Safe tool enables the public to anonymously report areas where they feel unsafe and why they feel that. And there is a new national operating model for investigation of rape and serious sexual offences. It means that the police and prosecutors will work more closely together, building stronger cases that focus on the behaviour of the suspect and place victims at the heart of everything. And we've launched a nationwide behaviour change campaign called Enough, to bring about an enduring shift in attitudes and behaviours that underpin the abuse of women and girls. Madam Deputy Speaker, most police officers, of course, use their powers to serve the public bravely and well. But when they fall short, the impact can be devastating. Society cannot function properly where trust in police is eroded. And I'm unambiguous that police forces must keep improving and must command the confidence of the people that they serve. And it's imperative that police leadership, of whatever rank, plays their part in this endeavour. I want once again to express my heartfelt sympathy to Sarah Everard's family and friends. I cannot begin to imagine the extent of the pain that they have felt. But together we must do everything possible to stop such agony being visited on others, to rebuild public trust, and to make sure that our streets and public places, as well as the private realm, are safe for women and girls, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of the statement. 3 years ago this Sunday, a young woman walking home was abducted and brutally killed by a serving police officer that she should have been able to trust to keep her safe. So we think today of Sarah Everard, her parents, family and friends who have to live with the shattering consequences of what happened. And this is also a day when many families who have lost sisters, daughters, mothers to violence are here in Parliament to hear my honourable friend, the member for Birmingham Yardley, read out the names of women killed this year. So today's damning report is about women's safety. It's for all the women across the country who worry about walking home alone or who worry about their daughter's safety. And it's also about trust and confidence in policing, whether we have the standards in place to maintain confidence in individual officers and for the vast majority of police officers working immensely hard with integrity to keep communities safe, whose work is undermined when standards fail. So I thank Lady Elish Angelini for her inquiry and this comprehensive first report, and thank those who came forward to give evidence. But it exposes a catalogue of appalling failures in the police vetting and misconduct processes and in investigating indecent exposure and sexual offences. Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer. He should have been stopped, and he could have been stopped from being a police officer. It is truly appalling. His history of alleged sexual offending stretches back so many years, and yet opportunities to investigate were repeatedly missed. And most disturbing of all, Lady Angelini says, there is nothing to stop another Wayne Couzens operating in plain sight. So although I agree with most of what the Home Secretary has said, I have to be really blunt about this. His response is too weak. It is too little, and it is too late. And the lack of urgency is unfathomable to me. The government has been repeatedly warned about failures around vetting and misconduct. Independent and inspectorate reports in 2012, in 2019, in 2022, in 2023, all highlighting serious failures in vetting procedures. That's why Labour called 2 years ago, for mandatory national vetting standards. Forces are working hard, but there isn't mandatory standards for all forces. All the government has done is brought in a code of practice 2.5 years after Sarah Everard's murder, which isn't strong enough. Frankly, it isn't even clear that Wayne Couzens or officers like David Carrick or Cliff Mitchell, both now convicted, would definitely have failed the vetting standards and the code of practice, even if it had been in at the time. He has to go further, and it has to be driven by the Home Office. On the misconduct changes that he's referred to, most of them aren't even in place yet, again, 3 years after Sarah Everard was murdered. So will the Home Secretary now commit today to a new mandatory framework for vetting, underpinned by legislation that all forces must abide by? We will support him in doing so. That will pursue any evidence about past domestic abuse or sexual offending, not simply convictions, and at minimum, would he just accept recommendation 6, which looks at a review of indecent exposure allegations and other sexual offences recording against serving police officers? At minimum, surely he can accept that today, now. And on automatic suspensions that he's just announced, again, does not go far enough. Only suspending people for criminal offences once they have been charged? Well, once investigations are being launched by the police into serving police officers around domestic abuse or sexual offences, those officers should be automatically suspended. And we have called for this again repeatedly. He is not going far enough. And as for the response on wider women's safety, it is also frankly too weak. I welcome many of the individual policies the Home Secretary referred to and that they've introduced over the last few years. Most of them are things that we called for. But again, it's nowhere near far enough. On indecent exposure, we have known about the awful murder of Libby Squire in 2019 and the failure to take indecent exposure seriously enough. Libby's mother, Lisa Squire, and the Home Affairs Select Committee Chair have been campaigning for stronger action on indecent exposure now for years. So again, surely he can accept at least recommendations, the first 3 recommendations of Lady Angelini's report around stronger training, guidance and approach to investigating indecent exposure by the police. Surely he can do that. The reality on women's safety is the number of prosecutions for domestic abuse has halved. Rape prosecutions are still taking years. Early action and intervention just does not happen. And there is a shocking drift on women's safety. There is a shocking drift on what the Home Secretary has said today. I urge him to support Labour's call for new vetting rules, to support specialist rape and sexual offences units in every force, to support Raneem's law so the police respond with urgency to domestic abuse and save lives, and to listen to Lisa Squire, the mother of Libby Squire. We say that this report should be a watershed, but we said Sarah Everard's murder 3 years ago should be a watershed, and far too little has changed. How long must we go on and say the same things? The first Women's Safety March
was on the streets of Leeds nearly 50 years ago, and we are saying the same things about our daughters' safety today. And I am sick and tired of nothing changing, sick and tired of women and girls who face abuse and violence not getting support while perpetrators get away with it. Yeah. Enough is enough. Let us have some urgency in the Home Secretary's response. We cannot stand for this anymore.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady makes a number of points about the findings set out in this report and also in the issues raised because of Sarah Everard's brutal murder. I have continued the work of my predecessors and indeed the work initiated by my right honourable friend, the member for Whitton, to make sure that the focus of not just the department but police forces around the country and indeed other organisations, statutory and non-statutory, that deal with the safety of women are focused relentlessly on this issue. We have made it clear there is still much work to do, and we will respond, and as I committed to, respond promptly to the findings of this report. I would take issue where, and I understand the frustration that not enough has happened, it has not moved fast enough, there is cultural change that still needs to be driven through, there is a culture of leadership, and I've made it very clear to police leaders, both in force in forces around the country and at the College of the Policing, of my expectation of leadership, not just process and procedure, but those things amplified and supported through leadership and a real commitment to drive change through those forces, and I will continue to do so. I don't think it is right for her to say that nothing has changed. That would be, I think, that would not be an accurate reflection of the situation from the time that she makes reference. There have been a number of improvements, including the first visit that I took as Home Secretary was to Holborn Police Station. I looked at the team that was working there, and there have been improvements. Now, I completely concede that those improvements are not universally applied. The differential performance between forces is not good enough, and I've discussed what can happen to make sure that the best performing forces are, the least well performing forces match the performance of the best performing forces. There remains a huge amount of work to be done. And of course, we are not waiting for the outcome of the second inquiry before we take action. But Dame Eilish, in her inquiry, shows that actually, whilst we, of course, we will look at changes to the recruitment and vetting processes which have been highlighted, her report shows that there were plenty of opportunities where the current system flagged problems, and those problems were not properly responded to by the force. Those are not procedural problems, those are a culture problem. So we will absolutely look at what processes and procedures need to change, but I am not going to wait for that report before doing so. I will continue to push for cultural change through society and, of course, through policing to make sure that where issues are flagged as they were, that they are taken seriously, they are investigated properly, and hopefully make sure that a situation like this never happens again.
Dame Priti Patel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I join everybody in the House today in paying tribute to Sarah Everard's family, and I really hope, having spent time with them in the past, that this report will at least give them some sense of the facts that they asked for around what happened to their beautiful daughter in terms of the circumstances that they themselves were looking for. And I do want to thank Dame Eilish Angelini for her incredible work, actually. Madam Deputy Speaker, this report is only part 1. There are part 2 and 3 to follow yet. But I do think this report has no surprises, really, when we think about what has been said thus far about policing since Sarah's appalling abduction and murder. And in fact, Zoe Billingham, HMI, and so many others have highlighted so many institutional and cultural and practical failures. So if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, just ask the Home Secretary to give his own view on what can happen next now, because this is a clear call for action when it comes to all police forces around the country to raise the bar on consistency, as has already been mentioned, when it comes not just to vetting but action. There is no place for criminal conduct at all, or corrupt conduct in policing. We police by consent in our country, and that bond has been broken, and this report actually shows how it has been broken with the public. So with reports 2 and 3 due to come out, will the Home Secretary please give a commitment that as those reviews are undertaken, and as he engages with Dame Angelini, that where issues are identified, he won't wait for the publication of further reports, but he will act swiftly, and also act very swiftly on putting forward some of the recommendations that are in part 1 of this report.
I once again want to thank my right honourable friend for initiating this report and appointing Lady Eilish. And she's absolutely right that I mean, sadly, there were details in this report that were new to many people and were painful to read. But much of what was highlighted in this report was already known. And we haven't waited for this report to start driving change. And indeed, I've had conversations with police leadership about my expectation of their focus on the policing of women and girls in particular, the safety of women and girls, and their attitude towards women and girls. And the point that I think is incredibly important is that processes and structures are, of course, important. And we review processes and structures, we will improve processes and structures. But the best processes and structures in the world cannot replace focus and leadership. And I think it's incredibly important that leadership at every rank in policing takes this seriously. And this is a conversation I've had with police leaders and the College of Policing to ensure that the attitudes which were highlighted in this report change. Because without those shifts of attitudes, all the processes in the world won't repair what needs to be repaired. And that is a conversation I will repeat.
SNP spokesman Kristen Oswald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful for advance sight of the statement. I'm also very grateful to Dame Eilish Angelini for the very careful and thorough way that she has worked through this, and the very thoughtful way that she talked through her findings online earlier. I do want to add that I'm also thinking of Sarah Everard today and her family, and I'd like to do likewise for the family of Emma Caldwell, who have experienced such a protracted, awful ordeal. Fundamentally, our police forces must both keep us safe and have our confidence that they'll do so. Of course, most police officers do an excellent job, but the trust in that has been hugely damaged by issues being raised, including, as we've heard, things like indecent exposure and not being acted upon. We've heard that Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer, and he spoke about vetting. I would like to put to him that it's both process and culture that we need to hear more about now. It cannot be one before the other. Both must be dealt with and dealt with immediately. And I'd also like to hear more about how those who are currently in the force, who may be showing telltale signs, as Couzens did, are to be dealt with. I'd also like to hear more about the automated systems he spoke about. What does he mean by automated systems and how will they work? And I wonder if you can tell me if additional funding is going to be made available to tackle institutional misogyny within the Met, and whether Barnett consequentials will be available so the Scottish Government can similarly look at the threats of violence against women and girls across society, but also within the police force. Good policing won't end the epidemic of male-inflicted violence upon women, but it should mean that men who abuse women are held to account. I wonder if he's aware of the relatively small proportion of police officers investigated for domestic abuse, sexual assault, rape and abusive position who were actually suspended over the last 2 years, and I wonder what steps he's taken to deal with that. I also wonder if he can talk further about those who have raised concerns about domestic abuse by police officers, and how the specific actions that are needed will be brought forward in this regard. I think that this is quite devastating for women's confidence in policing. I wonder if he is considering a statutory inquiry into institutional misogyny within the Metropolitan Police. And finally, he said at the beginning of his statement that this report and his government's actions have brought to light the concerns that women have. I have to say to him, we have had these concerns forever. This is not a new situation, but there is an opportunity to do more about it now, and I'd be keen to hear from him and how that might pan out.
Home Secretary.
On the Honourable Lady's final point that she made, I want to make clear what I meant by this. I wasn't suggesting that this report has brought to my attention or to the attention of the department a problem which is very severe and very long-standing. When I was in City Hall, when I was on the London Assembly, I contributed to the London Violence Against Women and Girls strategy back in 2008-2009. So I've been involved in this and passionate about this the entire time I've been in elected office. What Sarah Everard's murder, I think, highlighted more generally to the public was something that I know women have known for a very, very long time, which is that the public realm is not safe enough, that their concerns are often not taken seriously enough, that there has been a dismissive attitude to non-contact sexual crimes, that domestic abuse is something which is domestic abusers, for example, it takes far too long to bring them to justice, and too few of them are brought to justice, and that women don't feel safe during the process. There are many people in the House, and I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Birmingham Yardley, who has made it clear to this House what I know many women instinctively know, that far more needs to be done. So that's the point I'm making about these tragic circumstances, bringing a greater and wider attention, a whole of society attention. This is an issue about women and girls, but it's not an issue for women and girls. It has to be a whole society issue. And I remain absolutely committed to ensure that the specific recommendations of the report are responded to promptly. But as my right honourable friend, my predecessor, the member for Whittam, said, we're not waiting for the report to come out to take action. We've already taken action. We've already increased funding. With regard to Barnet consequentials, I'll have to leave others to talk through the implications of that, and within the wider funding envelopes of our support to Scotland as an integral part of the Union of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Tim Lawton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This comprehensive report reveals a truly appalling catalogue of what ultimately turned out to be fatal errors, incompetence and complacency, epitomised by a culture in parts of the Met, and it's important to say parts, where vile behaviour and deeply abusive language, as we would recognise, constituted banter. Now, Mark Rowley, when he came in, offered in response to open up, I think, more than 1,000 cases of previous standard and conduct investigations to see whether they'd been conducted properly. And when the Home Affairs Select Committee went to see the Standards Committee at the Met, we were told that this is going to take some time and we're going to see more of these cases coming out. So can the Home Secretary give us a progress report on what more instances we are likely to see in the public domain, and also the issue which we have raised, where those standards are undertaken, those reviews, by other members of the police force. And surely there is a case for bringing in greater independence from other agencies and institutions such as the military to help with these investigations from a different standpoint, so that the police are not just marking their own homework.
Home Secretary.
The review that was initiated by my predecessor has been put in and has been worked through by the Commissioner of Metropolitan Police is important, and he has demonstrated an admirable commitment to reform. I know, and I've had conversations directly with him about this, that he takes these issues incredibly seriously, and he wants to ensure that the Metropolitan Police not only serves the capital and everyone in it, but it is seen to serve them, and there is confidence in that. With regard to the final point, I mean, I will of course consider this, but I mean, I sat on the Metropolitan Police Authority Professional Standards Committee when I was first elected in 2008, between 2008 and 2012, and I saw the professionalism and the alacrity that the Professional Standards Department within the Metropolitan Police set about their work. There is a real anger directed at unprofessional officers by good officers. And actually, in my experience, the Professional Standards team take their work incredibly seriously. They want to root out bad officers. Through the Criminal Justice Bill, we're giving Chief Constables more power to root out bad officers and to do so quickly. And I've committed to support them when they do so.
Chairman of the Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome the statement today, and I do hope we will get a full response from the Home Secretary very quickly. Can I also associate myself with the comments of the Home Secretary and other Right Honourable and Honourable members today that our thoughts are with the family and friends of Sarah Everard. I wanted to just ask the Home Secretary again about this issue of indecent exposure, which is highlighted in the report and the Home Secretary talked a little bit about. And in my own constituency, we had the horrific case of Libby Squire, who was raped and murdered by a man who had been stalking and roaming the streets of Hull for 18 months prior to murdering Libby, exposing himself, acts of voyeurism. People didn't report it because they thought the police would not take it seriously. Now, Libby's mum, Lisa Squire, has been campaigning on this for the last few years. I wondered whether the Home Secretary might meet with Lisa Squire, and also the Home Affairs Select Committee has had a recent hearing where Lisa came and gave evidence. And it would be interesting to know what the Home Secretary's view is. What more can be done now to encourage people to come forward, women in particular, when this happens to them? And I'd also say that I think almost every woman I know at some stage in her life has had this happen to her. This is endemic.
Home Secretary.
I thank the Honourable Lady, the Chair of Committee, for raising this point, and of course I will seek to find an opportunity to meet with Squire's family about this issue. Look, there needs to be a cycle of increased confidence. I hate some of the phraseology that has been applied, and I choose never to apply about this, about implying that there's a less seriousness about this, because the sad truth is often when we see reports of serious sexual violence, that you look back through the case history and you can see plenty of examples of criminality leading up to that, and so we do absolutely need to take this seriously. The women who have been subject to, who've been the victims of these kind of crimes, this kind of behaviour, need to feel confident reporting, and they need to feel confident that their reports will be taken seriously. And the more that they can see that the police take action, the more confident they will be in coming forward. So there has to be a virtuous circle that we need to develop. And we are not there yet. We know we're a long way from that. And this is one of these areas, and again, we've seen it in the Couzens case. He was known to have done this, and that should have triggered a much more robust response, but it didn't, and we have to address why it didn't, and we have to ensure that leadership and policing understand that we collectively in the House and the Home Office expect them to take it more seriously and send the signal that these crimes are not trivial and they should not be ignored.
Caroline Noakes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to associate my thoughts as well with the Everard family. This report tells us that the environment did nothing to discourage his misogynistic view of women. We know that not every flasher becomes a rapist, but we also know that every rapist starts somewhere. I respectfully say to my right honourable friend, of course, there have been good changes with regard to criminal justice and longer sentences for the most violent and the most serious offences, but that is too late. We have to intervene in the offending journey. My committee heard last week from Deputy Assistant Commissioner Stuart Cundy, a man who has taken on a really difficult job, overturning those stones in the Metropolitan Police Officer, those stones that turn up 1,600 instances of officers with at least one allegation of a sexual offence or domestic violence. 1,600. Can my right honourable friend give us assurance today that he will give more power to the elbow of Stuart Cundy so that we get rid of these individuals from our police service?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. And when I say there's that cycle of confidence, women need to see that when these crimes are reported, that they are investigated and the perpetrators are brought to justice, because only then will they feel confident to come forward. And this is why I'm saying these are serious. These are not trivial offences. And she's right to say that not everyone that's a flasher, not everyone that has made unwanted and inappropriate sexual advances to women go on to become a rapist or a murderer. But the more people who are dissuaded from that behaviour because of swift and professional criminal justice, the more people we can prevent getting to those later stages, and that is why this is so important, and that is why that cultural change needs to be driven through the whole system. And a number of the Angelini recommendations are, of course, for public bodies, government departments other than the Home Office, and for public bodies outside government. All of us have got to take this incredibly seriously. As I say, this is a whole of society approach, and that will remain the fundamental philosophy that I use to underpin the work that the Home Office is doing in this area.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I associate myself with those comments in relation to the Everard family, and also to Lady Eilish Angelini, who the report today is a continuation of reports that she has done highlighting failures in our criminal justice system. I noted in the Home Secretary's statement mention of funding being given to the National Police Chiefs Council in relation to flagging of police officers in relation to vetting systems. My own experience in the police service is that IT system improvements take a long time and are quite complex. So I suppose my question for the Home Secretary is, what timescales do we have in mind for those improvements? Secondly, what engagement is happening with Police Scotland? Because obviously police officers transfer to forces in and out with the UK. And I suppose my final question is that if today a serving police officer is found in a concerning situation that requires input into the intelligence system and does not identify themselves as a police officer, are we confident that they would be dealt with accordingly?
She raises a number of points about the implementation of the changes that we are making. I can't give precise timescales at the moment, because this is a piece of work that is ongoing, recently been initiated. But my desire is for these things to happen as quickly as possible. And she's absolutely right that IT changes, systems changes are not instant. And I am impatient to get improvement on this, which is why I keep saying we are not waiting for these things to go forward. These are amplifiers and accelerators of what should be a fundamental change that we are looking to drive through immediately. The earliest conversations that I had when appointed as Home Secretary was on this issue with the College of Policing, with Lady Eilish herself. One of the first meetings I had being appointed with the Home Secretary was with Lady Eilish about this report and the work that we could do to get ahead of the findings that she's put forward.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for his statement, and indeed he will be clear that the overwhelming number of Metropolitan Police officers are brave individuals who put their lives on the line frequently to protect all of us. The key is those individuals want to see these bad apples rooted out and indeed never coming into the police service in the first place. However, there are two aspects, of course, to the Metropolitan Police problems. One is that they are the one force in the country that failed to meet their recruitment targets in the last year. And secondly, that the Mayor has yet to provide the funding from his budget to enable the cultural change that we need to see in the Metropolitan Police. So does he agree with me that we've got to make sure that standards don't slip in terms of recruitment, they should be enforced, and also the funding needs to be provided to change the culture of the Metropolitan Police as we would like to see?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend, of course, draws right attention to the fact that the Police and Crime Commissioner for London is the Mayor of London and therefore has a duty to make sure that the police force over which he has a political control changes in the way that's been highlighted through the inquiry and the findings of this part one of the inquiry. He is also absolutely right that even though forces across the country, many of whom are now at the largest they've ever been in terms of force numbers, that's sadly not true in the Metropolitan Police. But there absolutely must be no sacrifice of quality of vetting to try and hit the recruitment targets that we have made clear we expect the Metropolitan Police to hit. We want the Metropolitan Police to be a well-recruited force. The funding has been put on the table. It's not been fully utilised by the Mayor, but the funding has been put on the table to enable the Met to do so. It needs to be populated with good professional officers. That is the bar. That is the minimum standard that we expect, and we expect all leadership, both uniformed and political, to abide by that philosophy.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first put on record that my honourable friend and constituency neighbour, the member for Streatham, in whose constituency Sarah Everard lived and where she was abducted and then murdered, is currently on an overseas visit with the Joint Committee on Human Rights and is very sorry not to be in the chamber today for this important statement. Sarah Everard's abduction and murder had a profound impact on women across South London. Like so many young people, she had moved to London for work and made her home in our diverse community in Lambeth. She was one of us. But both before this appalling murder and afterwards, residents in South London and further afield raising concerns about police behaviour which was misogynistic, racist or homophobic were repeatedly told that this was just a few bad apples, an offensive phrase which diminishes and denies their experience and belies what have been shown to be structural, cultural and widespread problems in policing. Will the Secretary of State, in light of the findings in this report today, apologise to everyone whose experiences of unacceptable behaviour by police officers have been diminished and denied in this way, and for whom, had they been listened to when they reported their experiences, action could have been taken which might have prevented Sarah's appalling and tragic murder from taking place?
Home Secretary.
As I said, from my first day in elected office, I've tried to drive cultural change and an increase in professionalism, firstly in the Metropolitan Police and then in this job in policing more widely, and I will continue to do so all the time that I have the power and authority to do so. There needs to be fundamental change. There must be fundamental change. We must create an environment where women and girls feel confident in policing, not fearful of policing. That will remain my focus. I can assure her and the House that I will remain committed to that.
Simon Fell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to pay tribute to Lady Angelini for her thoughtful and considered report. In the Home Affairs Committee, we've taken significant evidence on this issue, and her findings chime with what we've heard on police standards and the culture within policing. It's worth saying the vast majority of police officers join with good intentions. They serve their communities well and with honour, and they serve the public well. But that core of rotten behaviour that she so well addresses in this report does exist. And that's what we have to address, because at the heart of this issue is trust in policing, and we need to get back to a place where women trust police officers and they trust when they report things, those reports will be listened to. So my question to my right honourable friend is whether he has confidence in not just what the Metropolitan Police are doing, but forces around the country. I have Cumbrian women who are concerned about their walks home at night, in looking at the people within their forces and making sure that they are rooting out bad behaviour and getting the culture right.
Home Secretary.
As I said in my response to the Right Honourable Lady, the Shadow Home Secretary, the simple truth is there is not consistency across the country. Some forces deal with these issues better than others. We want to make sure that we increase the level of focus on these issues right across the country. The strategic policing requirement that I've put forward is part of driving that attitudinal change right across the country. I demand that all police forces take this as a priority issue, take it as seriously as the work that they do on counter-terrorism policing, for example, and they learn from best practice, which is why I've spoken extensively with the College of Policing about this issue, because every woman, everywhere in the country, should have confidence in their police force.
Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to send my love to Sarah Everard and also to the families of the 340 women in this country who have been killed since the day that Sarah Everard was. The Home Secretary there said that he takes the strategic policing requirement is forced to make it so that this issue is as important as terrorism. So if he could tell the House which police force in the country that has a counter-terror unit has the same number of officers in that unit as they have specialists in violence against women and girls. If he could answer the question of me about how his department spent £50 million last year on 6,700 prevent referrals to prevent people from ending up in terrorism, and we spent 18 million on 898,000 police reports of domestic abuse. So on one side you've got 6,000, on 1,000 side you've got nearly 1 million. The Home Office spends £8 million on DV perpetrators, £50 million on diverting terrorist perpetrators. So we're taking it as seriously. To say that we are doing everything possible in flagging intelligence is just not true. So currently, if you are found to have raped your wife or raped one of your children or abused your children in a family court in this country, found by a British court, no police force in the country would be entitled to have that information when they were doing the vetting. Will he commit today that that will all be completely and utterly available, and that if somebody is found to have raped or child abuse in a British court, that when they want to become a police officer or a social worker, that information will be available?
I mean, the Honourable Lady raises an incredibly important point about making sure that where there have been offences, that they are taken into consideration with regard to the vetting, and that is part of the set of reforms that we will be looking at driving through. She makes the point about numbers of officers and budgets. I'm not convinced that is necessarily the most useful metric of the seriousness with which we take things. But as I say, the strategic policing requirement makes it clear of my expectations. Ultimately, we continue to increase the financial support for the policing of these issues, and I will, as I say, and I've committed this to the House, I will continue to ensure that police officers at all ranks take this seriously, because without attitudinal change, increased funding, changed processes, both of which are incredibly important. I absolutely agree with her that they are important, but without a fundamental shift in philosophy, without a fundamental shift in attitude, they will not have the effect that she and I both desire.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Home Secretary for his statement today? Like many, I was shocked by the murder of Sarah Everard 3 years ago. Can I praise the dignity of her family? I worry for women walking home at night. I lost trust in the police then. Can I press the Home Secretary, though? Following on from the challenge of my right honourable friend, the Shadow Home Secretary, surely if an investigation is launched into a police officer after allegations of domestic abuse or sexual assault, officers should be suspended straight away.
Secretary.
As I say, I've worked in I've worked with professional standards officers, and I do think something like that, which superficially seems obvious, is often something more complicated than that. We have put forward changes in the thresholds that trigger suspension. Of course, we expect investigating officers to move swiftly, as I've said in at the dispatch box at the introduction of the Criminal Justice Bill. We want officers who are innocent to be vindicated quickly, and we want officers who are not to be removed from the force. That remains the philosophy that underpins the work we do on this.
Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Home Secretary for his statement today, and again, like many others, I pay tribute to the family of Sarah Everard and many other women who've lost their lives at violence against men. I think about the events back in March 2021 and taking people back to the vigil that was organised in Clapham Common, which covers my constituency and my friend, the member for Streatham, who's not able to be here. And the fact that women wanted to come together to show that solidarity. And we all remember the scenes of Pat C. Stevenson being handcuffed on the ground by 2 police officers. The Home Secretary has spoken this afternoon about women having the confidence to come forward and that they should report. The Home Secretary also mentioned the Metropolitan Police Authority, which he was one of the first founder members. I served as an Assembly member and sat on the Police and Crime Committee. We saw some of the reports in terms of Met Police officers' actions. Does he not agree that for those very same women to come forward, they need confidence in the police, and that includes suspending those police officers who've acted inappropriately at the first hurdle? No ifs, no buts.
Secretary of State.
Well, I mean, I respect the Honourable Lady's experience in this issue, but she would have heard the response I gave to the Honourable gentleman, is that there has to be, there can't be universality in this. There has to be a response based on the facts of the individual cases, and we would be open, probably highly likely for a successful challenge if suspension decisions weren't based on the individual circumstances of each case. But we have made it clear that the threshold has historically been far too high. We have reviewed that threshold. We have made it quicker and easier for officers to be suspended. That goes hand in hand with the changes we're making through the Criminal Justice Bill to make sure the disciplinary procedure operates more quickly, so that if it is found that the officer has behaved appropriately, they are returned to duty quickly, and if they have behaved inappropriately, they are sanctioned quickly. That is incredibly important, and the demonstration of this, and the policing of the vigil for Sarah Everard was awful. It was awful. It took what was already an incredibly painful set of circumstances and made it worse. I've spoken to police officers who recognise that. I will continue as I say, to speak about leadership, because that's not a process point, that's about a leadership point. It's about driving attitudinal change. It's about a willingness to accept criticism from people who have felt victimised for far too long and who are demanding a change in the attitude of police around the country, and to respond to those incredibly legitimate concerns at a point of incredible sadness and tragedy, amplify what was already a tragic circumstance. And I will do everything I can to make sure situations like that are never repeated.
Gio Moro.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too want to pay tribute to the family of Sarah Everard. In Newcastle and across the country, her vile murder led to an outpouring of grief and horror. But it did not, as the Home Secretary said, start a conversation about violence against women. Rather, it showed that the voices, that is what he said, rather it showed that the voices, the pain and the fears of women were being ignored. He says he takes violence against women seriously. His language and his actions need to reflect that. And on that, will he speak specifically to recommendation 11 about information sharing between forces so that predators like Couzens cannot move from force to force? This is not only an issue for the Met.
Home Secretary.
Yeah, as I said in response to the Honourable Lady, the point I was making about starting a national conversation is there are people who should have been thinking about this, but who weren't. The terrible circumstances in terms of the murder of Sarah Everard triggered a conversation there. As I say, within the Home Office, within the policing, my own experience long predated these terrible events. But we must recognise, indeed it's been said by a number of people across the House, that something changed when Sarah was murdered. Something changed. We must absolutely make sure that the terrible circumstances that this inquiry demands that we see, we must make sure that is utilised to drive fundamental change. And I can commit to her that I will continue to drive that change. I will continue to prioritise violence against women and girls. It is a key priority, and I've communicated this over and over again since the first day I was appointed as Home Secretary.
Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. Can I welcome this statement and the report? But frankly, it beggars belief. It's shocking beyond comprehension that we can have serving police officers in this country who have been convicted of multiple counts of rape, kidnap, breaches of non-molestation orders and other serious offences. In his replies, a number of times he said it isn't just an issue for women and girls. I would argue it shouldn't be an issue for women and girls. This is actually a man's problem. We need to really address male attitudes towards women and girls. There can be no place for misogyny, for violence, for warped views, for predatory behaviour. This is a problem of certain sections of the male population. So what more is the government doing to tackle these warped views of women and girls by men?
Secretary.
No, he is absolutely right. This is, and as I say, this is an issue which affects the lives of women, but it shouldn't be thought of as a woman's issue. And he is absolutely right that it's male perpetrators who need to change. And I've always said I don't want women to have to change their behaviour. I don't want women to have to be in segregated train carriages. I don't want women not to be able to go out at night. It shouldn't be curtailing the behaviour of women that we talk about. It's about fundamental change in male behaviour, and he's absolutely right on this. The Honourable Lady from Newcastle, raised a point which I failed to answer in my question to her, so I'm going to take the opportunity if the Honourable Gentleman doesn't mind, because information sharing between forces is absolutely key. And we have seen that Couzens went from Kent to the civil nuclear before coming to the Metropolitan Police. And whilst there were failures at various points, his vetting failure in Kent should have flagged in other areas, particularly as he went on to very sensitive pieces of work with civil nuclear constabulary, and also then as a firearms officer in the Met. It should have triggered much firmer action, and that information sharing would be a part of that. But I finish by repeating my point that the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right. It is about changing male behaviour. It's not about changing women's behaviour.
Christine Jolly.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like others, my thoughts today are with Sarah Everard's family on what must be a very difficult day for them. Lady Angelini's report is damning, but one of the saddest things about it is that many of the things she mentions about reports not being taken seriously, about officers not being properly trained, about the failures of culture within police forces, simply reinforced the fears that many of us have for the safety of ourselves and our daughters on our streets. And I welcome what the Secretary of State says about the need for societal change and men's behaviour. So would he agree with me that a vital step to doing that would be recognising misogyny as a hate crime and moving forward to ensure that women feel better protected by it?
Home Secretary.
Well, what will drive most confidence is women seeing that their issues are taken seriously during investigations, the speed with which the police respond to their investigations. My honourable friend made the point about non-contact sexual offences being taken seriously, so interventions can happen much earlier and before greater harm is perpetrated. I know there have been calls with regard to misogyny being a hate crime, and whilst I understand the calls for that, I'm yet to be convinced that that necessarily would drive the change that we seek to drive. I think there are other direct things that we should do and indeed are doing to drive that change. We've increased the penalties for sexual related criminality, as I said in my statement. We are ensuring that rapists are not released at the 2/3 point. We are ensuring that where there is what's the word I'm looking for? Where there are issues with regard to convictions that are to do with sadism and the such like, people serve whole life a tariff. So we are making it clear through the penal system, through the penalties for these crimes, that we take them incredibly seriously, but it has to be ongoing work.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Further to the response that the Home Secretary just given to the member from Edinburgh, I suspect his words are going to come as news to the member for Tunbridge Wells, because I feel like the last hour, I just don't understand. We passed a law in this place last June called the Protection from Sex-Based Harassment in Public Act. It was designed explicitly to recognise where women are targeted on our streets and to give them additional protections. The suffragettes taught us deeds, not words. It wasn't even mentioned by the Home Secretary as something. I'm not surprised. He's not the only one who doesn't value it. As a London MP, I've written to the Met Commissioner about this. The Met is refusing to recognise the Protection from Sex-Based Harassment Act in public, says it doesn't see it as part of tackling violence against women, doesn't recognise it as tackling misogyny, as the Home Secretary seems to do, not understanding that women being targeted on our street is misogyny, because it is happening to them. That's why they have no confidence. And I just asked the Home Secretary, if he wants to rebuild that confidence, will he A, ask the Met to abide by the laws that this place has passed in tackling protection of women, and B, will he actually get on and implement the piece of legislation? Because all he needs to do is sign that statutory instrument, and maybe that's one good thing that could come out of today. If he recognises that women don't feel safe on our streets and it's not their problem to fix, maybe he, as the man in charge, will do something about that.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I repeat I recognise the frustration that the Honourable Lady expresses. I can only restate my personal commitment with regard to the implementation of decisions made by this House and the Metropolitan Police, he should recognise that that is a decision for the political head of policing in London, which is the Labour Mayor of London. I am more than happy to take it up with him if she hasn't already done so.
Antonias.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, Dame Angelini's findings that there is nothing to stop another Wayne Couzens operating in plain sight worries me, because he has been operating in plain sight since 2002. Now, the Home Secretary has used many words today which he will be held to. Systemic issues in policing, trust in policing, attitudinal change is needed, change is needed. Well, actions speak louder than words, Home Secretary. As the police vetting standards and misconduct systems need looking at now. So will he meet with me to discuss my police declarations bill, which I brought as a 10-minute rule bill only a few weeks ago to the House, and discuss with me how a register of memberships of secret societies should be publicly available, because we need to rebuild trust in our police.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will ensure that either I or one of the ministers in the department get the details of the points that she has brought forward. And I'm happy to be held accountable for the words that I've said at the dispatch box and the words that I've said throughout my political career on this issue. I'm more than happy to be held to account about this, because I am not going to lose focus on this. I can assure her and the House of this. And as I say, the whole time that I have authority and jurisdiction over these areas, I will maintain this as a priority and demand that others, whether they be in uniform or out of uniform, whether they be operational police officers or in the political leadership of police forces, take this as seriously as it should, because it is totally unacceptable that women and girls are not able to live their lives fully in our society because of fear, not only of criminality, but of fear about a lack of response from policing when these issues are brought to light.
Thank you. That concludes the statement, and we will move to the next item of business, the next statement on the security of elected representatives. I call Minister Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on the security of elected representatives. Now, this House brings together our nation. People from every part of the United Kingdom, from every background, are represented here to debate, to argue, to challenge, and to find the best course for our country to take. Now, that's the way it should be, because this House doesn't belong to any one community or interest group. It belongs to every citizen from every corner of the kingdom. The decisions we take don't just affect the lives of our friends, our neighbours, and our community. They affect every community, and every community's voice, even those we disagree with, must be properly represented. That principle is at the heart of who we are as a country and as a democracy. Our democracy only works if those who elect us are free to choose the individual they wish, and if that individual, the one that they have chosen, has the freedom to say what they think. In recent days, we've seen those principles waver, and the strain of rising community tensions is beginning to show. Instead of debate and accountability, we have seen intimidation and threats. Members of this House have told me that they feel they have to vote a certain way, not because it's the right thing for their communities, or even because the majority in their community wishes it, but because a few, a threatening few, have made their voices heard and made them fear for their safety and the safety of their families. Even this House, the House that has persevered through fire and through war, has been pressured into changing the way that we debate. And we all understand why. The assassinations of our friends Joe Cox and Sir David Amess have affected us all. We know that there are extremists out there, and the truth is clear. The danger is real. Madam Deputy Speaker, we also know that bending to the threat of violence and intimidation is wrong. It doesn't just betray those who sent us, it encourages those who, through us, are bullying them. Last Wednesday, demonstrators threatened to force Parliament to lock its doors. What these thugs were actually asking us to do was to put our constituents second and to bow to those who were shouting loudest. Now that's more than a threat to us. It's a threat to the very democratic principles and values that define who we are as a country. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me be absolutely clear. They must fail. If we were to stumble or to succumb to these pressures, we would not just see this House diminished, but our communities across the country would suffer. And some things are more important than any of us as individuals. Pressures have always existed, but since the 7th of October attacks on Israel, they have spiked. Along with a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism, accompanied by demonstrations which have caused profound distress and fear in the Jewish community and beyond, we are seeing a darkness return to our streets. British Muslims also face threats. Islamist extremists call other Muslims apostates unless they are willing to destroy the society that has given everyone, including many, many expressions of Islam practiced here today, the freedom to worship as they choose. And far-right extremists are joining them in claiming that Islam has no place in Britain. Both claim that Britain is a divided nation, not a united kingdom. Both are wrong. And this government rejects that agenda of isolation and fear. We will ensure that all voices in our democracy are heard. We are ensuring that those who have been elected to serve their community are able to do so without fear. That's why we're committing an additional £31 million to protect the democratic process and our elected representatives. This funding will primarily support MPs, councillors, police and crime commissioners and mayors. The Operation Bridger network, which already provides police support to MPs, will be expanded so all elected representatives and candidates have a dedicated named police officer contact on security matters where needed. Forces around the country will be able to draw on a new fund to deliver additional patrols so they will be better able to respond to heightened community tensions. And, working closely with Parliament and the police, we will provide access to private security for members who face the highest risk. Yesterday, the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Policing Minister and I met senior policing leaders to discuss these issues. Together, the Home Office, the National Police Chiefs Council, the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners and the College of Policing, with input from the Crown Prosecution Service, have agreed a new Defending Democracy policing protocol. It contains 7 key commitments to implement minimum standards of policing at events, to prevent intimidatory protest at homes, and to ensure protests at party offices, town halls, parliaments, or other democratic venues do not inhibit the democratic process. PCCs and chief constables have been asked to report back on implementation of these measures by April. Before I finish, may I pay tribute to our law enforcement and intelligence agencies who keep us safe at all times. This additional funding will help them to support us in undertaking our democratic duty. Now, I take the safety and security of all members of this House extremely seriously, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I know do you, and I know Mr. Speaker does as well. The truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there are some things that transcend political dividing lines. There are principles that are so fundamental, so sacred even, that we must guard them, all of us, against all threats, regardless of party allegiance. Defending our democracy is at the core of who we are as a nation. It is the living expression of the concepts of freedom of thought and freedom of speech. As we legislate and debate, as we argue and criticise, we must be robust. We must continue to test ideas and each other in order to serve the British people best. And we must challenge each other and remember that this isn't just about us. We are only the temporary guardians of liberties that we have inherited. Today, it is our turn to defend them. This is our watch. And it is for us to rise above the fray and to say, with total clarity, we will not be cowed. We will not be silenced. We will not be bullied. The people we are privileged to represent deserve nothing less, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Dan Jarvis.
Thank